Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dylan, one of the biggest storylines in college football that just does not seem to get a lot of noise around it was Coach Kotelnicki coming over and taking over the Penn State offense heading into 2024. We were banging the table last year. This Penn State team was a college football playoff caliber team if that offense had just been a little bit better, and they go higher arguably my favorite offensive coordinator in the country in Coach Kotelnicki to take over this offense. I want to dive into some film and talk about some concepts that Coach Kotelnicki brings to this Penn State offense. A massive storyline in my mind. We're going to get to see it firsthand this Saturday in the spring game. Really fired up to get into it. Before we do it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. It has been a blast talking this program on the recruiting trail with Elvin Henderson committing in the transfer portal. The Penn State fans showing a ton of love. Cannot thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And Dill, I'm going to give you the T-Box. You won't find two bigger Coach Kotelnicki fans than the boys right here. I'll give you the T-Box before we get into the film. What do you like so much about this move?
I mean, frankly, and we've said this about other coaches in the past, like even Jimbo Fisher going out and taking a crack at Bobby Petrino, and some of these other coaches, Jim Harbaugh going out and trying to do some different things, going back old school with his defensive coordinator move. I mean, sometimes when these programs with these really, really good head coaches kind of get stuck a little bit, I think sometimes they're content to just sit there and not make big changes. I think for James Franklin to look at this program as an offensive guy who no doubt has a ton of pride in what he can do, coaching that side of the ball, and look at it and say, hey, this isn't good enough. We got to do something different and go get a very dominant offensive coordinator for that room who's going to have full control, I think, of this offense. I think it's a huge step. And it was something Penn State really had to do because you look, this is a championship level team with a better offense. Their defense has been playing that way. They have been making those hires on the defensive side of the ball, bringing in guys like Manny Diaz. It's now time for this offense to catch up. I think they can with Kotelnicki. Yeah, it's got to work, and we got to see it. But this is the right move. They had to do something.
And what fires me up before we get into some of the film is the fit's great. I mean, you look at this Kansas offense, it wants to run the football, ran the football 60% of the time last year. That was 12th most in the country, really. Only the military academies running the football more than the Kansas Jayhawks. 5.3 yards per carry. That was top 10. Dill, you look at how Penn State wants to operate on offense. They want to be physical along the line of scrimmage. They want to use those two running backs. This rushing attack is going to take leaps and bounds. But what excites me so much, and something that we were arguably probably the biggest flaw Penn State had on offense, was just not being able to create explosive plays in the passing attack. Although Kansas only throws the ball 40% of the time, that's 122nd in the country. Dill, 10.1 yards per pass attempt. That is number 2 in the country. You're not going to find an offensive coordinator better than Coach Kotelnicki at dialing up those explosive plays in that passing attack. The balance that he has, being able to establish the run and then take deep shots down the field. I mean, that is a perfect recipe for how this Penn State offense is constructed.
And that is kind of, I think, what people underrate a little bit is I think they look, oh, Drew Allar's not a running quarterback. Look at what they were doing with Jalen Daniels and Jason Bean. Oh, they just want to run the ball with the quarterbacks. I mean, if you look at it, that's not really fundamentally what they were doing. No. They very much relied on Neal. He was their guy. He was their workhorse. They relied on a very physical offensive line. And people don't think Kansas, they don't think physical offensive lines, but Kansas offensive line is really good, and they like to run the ball with their backs. And I do think Drew Allar is a competent enough runner to do what they need him to do and give them those looks, give them some of those speed option looks and make it a threat so that teams have to honor it.
He is competent enough to run this offense, right? He is no Cade McNamara. Yes, he's not the athlete Jalen Daniels is, but I thought you made a really good point. Yes, Jalen Daniels made some things happen with his legs. That is not how this Kansas offense runs. They do not need a Jalen Daniels to run this kind of offense.
And I mean, the reason they have the quarterback run is to get more space for their running backs. It wasn't so they could hit big plays with their quarterback, I don't think. I think it was to try to open some things up for Neal. And again, you look at guys like Nick Singleton. I mean, he's a guy who just needed more daylight last year. He's a guy who, if he gets the ball and a good opportunity, has that explosiveness, has that long speed to make things happen. They just didn't get him in those positions. And then you got Katron Allen, who can really be physical in between the tackles. I think they got the personnel to do it. I think he knows how to use his quarterbacks, not necessarily to be the Heisman Cam Newton type runner, but open up some space for running backs. And that, I think, is what he's going to do, and they can do.
Still, I'd argue, kind of going back to how Drew fits into this offense, I'd argue he's even a better fit than Jalen Daniels and Jason Bean. I think I'm going to get a lot of hot takes in the comment section because of that. Hear me out. You look at this Kansas passing attack, Jalen Daniels, 10.4 yards average depth of target. That was one of the highest in the country. Jason Bean, 13.4 yards average depth of target. This is an offense that wants to attack the deeper third. I'll come out and say it. Drew's arm talent in terms of accessing down the field, it's much better than Jalen Daniels and Jason Bean. So I think there's an argument that he might even fit what Kansas wants to do on offense, especially in that passing attack, better than what he had at Kansas. I think that might be partially the reason why he took this job at Penn State. Now, let's get into the film a little bit. I think the first thing that, as a college football fan, as a Michigan fan, I'm not sure how fired up I am, but as a college football fan, I'm certainly fired up as long as it's against Ohio State, the two running back sets. I mean, this is outside of Ohio State with Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. I don't know if I could name you a better running back duo heading into 2024. Coach Kotelnicki is an expert at operating out of these two running back sets, getting a lot of guys different looks. And Dill, you said it, Nick Singleton was not given enough opportunity to get in space and let him be a playmaker. You take a look at some of these concepts, they are predicated on getting linebackers flow in one direction, getting the football out to their playmakers in space. Look at the space Devin Neal has to work with. Nick Singleton, Devin Neal's a great running back. Nick Singleton's a great running back. They are both looking at these opportunities and saying, these are going to be chunk plays for a guy like Nick Singleton. If you're a Penn State fan, this rushing attack was already been pretty solid. It's going to take another step heading into 2024 because I don't know if there's a better offensive coordinator in the country at scheming up opportunities for his running back to go make plays and be in space than you got in Coach Kotelnicki.
And when you got two guys who are, I don't know. I don't want to say like equal because I do think they're both do some things a little bit different. I think Katron Allen's a little bit more of that hammer inside, and Singleton's a bit more of that guy you want to get in space and let him work. So I think when you have two guys who can have threaten different parts of the field and allow them to, again, do what you were just kind of seeing in that play where you do put the linebackers in conflict and you just get them a half a step behind. And if you can get them with that or get some of those Penn State playmakers like that, it just gives you the opportunity to hit one or two more of those big plays, which at the end of the day is what cost Penn State most of their football games against teams like Michigan, Ohio State. They just couldn't hit that one or two big plays that those other schools could with guys like Marvin Harrison or Blake Corum or Donovan Edwards. I mean, those playmakers just got one more opportunity that I don't think Penn State's offensive system really was conducive to give.
You talked about how Nick Singleton, Katron Allen have kind of different skill sets. Again, going back, if y'all can't tell by now, like, I'm a massive fan of Coach Kotelnicki. One of the things outside of the X's and O's that I think Coach Kotelnicki does such a good job of is recognizing the skill sets of his players and then catering the offense to those skill sets. And you have two running backs who are both very good running backs that can do some different things. You're going to see both those running backs be put in spots where they can really be successful. Now, you look at the passing attack, this is the story. I think a lot of us assume like this Penn State rushing attack going to be damn good in 2024. How can we manufacture bigger plays in this passing attack? It was the Achilles heel of this Penn State offense. Dill, my biggest excitement for Drew going into 2024 is it's going to be easier. Like, this is an offense that shows complexity, but in reality, it's very simple concepts that makes quarterbacks reads really easy. And I think the biggest thing that we want to see Drew take that step is just being in a little bit more of a command. And I don't think that Penn State offense last year was very conducive. You give Drew Allar, you give him opportunities to get the football to his playmakers, he's going to make those throws. And I think part of why I love Coach Kotelnicki's passing attack so much is, it's predicated on getting his wide receivers separation and in space. He likes to go to these bunch sets, right? You motion top of your screen, you got that bunch set. 3rd and 5, you got to have guys create separation and make a play. And then you kind of run this cute little pick play where you're creating explosive play, but only throwing the ball 3 yards down the field. Again, you go to this Oklahoma film, very similar thing where you motion into trips on the top of your screen and you're going to put your wide receivers in a spot where they can separate relatively easily. You play this film out, and again, very similar concept. This read is easy for Jason Bean. It's going to be easy for Drew. You know where your guy is going to be open, when he's going to be open. Easy pitch and catch for a first down against Oklahoma. Those type of things in terms of just making Drew's life a little bit easier operating this offense. That's going to be worlds for this kid who we all know has the talent, just needs to get a little bit more confidence.
I think you're right. There is something to like just using formations and using your like some concepts to get guys free releases, to get them a little bit of space. I mean, you even go back to how Penn State used to try to do it last year. It felt like it was a lot of, all right, go one-on-one and go see if you can win. You think back to that Michigan game, I think it was a 4th and 4 early in that football game, huge play, and they just go at like Caden Saunders versus Mike Sanders still. All right, go beat him. And Caden Saunders, to his credit, did it. But I think like you look at what Kansas did, they just make that an easier play. They use their formation, they get their guy a clean release, and they get him in a little bit of space. And frankly, I think the way they play call off of that type of concept, and if you want to play more of that zone defense to kind of deal with that sort of pick action, they can attack your safeties down vertically. You see that against Texas. You go to Oklahoma State, you see that. Again, he does things to put defense in conflict where there just isn't an easy answer of, oh, just go beat your guy. I mean, that's a hard play when a guy has to deal with this. When a safety has to deal with a flat-footed wide receiver running down up the seam on him, like that's a really difficult play. So I think he does a great job of not only using his formations, but making his calls and sequences that make sense and make it really hard to do.
You want to talk about like putting defense in conflict? I don't think there's a play. This will be the last film that we kind of go to. Talk about conflict. You got pre-snap motion. You're going to go play action. Take a look at these second-level defenders for Oklahoma. When you kind of freeze frame here, you give pre-snap motion, you give play action. Still, these linebackers, these safeties in complete conflict, and you kind of create what you're able to do with this pre-snap motion, this play action. Massive throwing window for Jason Bean. And again, you're giving Drew just these easy reads, these easy throwing windows for him to really find a rhythm and hit his wide receivers in space. You see that here. And again, Jason Bean, not nearly the arm talent that Drew has coming into at Penn State in 2024. I think you talk about attacking defenses in different ways, giving them multiple different things to look at. Like you said, putting them in conflict. Not a better offensive coordinator in the country to do so. Dill, we're going to see this on the spring game this Saturday. We're going to break down some of the concepts that we saw and kind of how Coach Kotelnicki takes his concepts from Kansas, puts them into Penn State. Yes, you'll probably see some twists on what they want to run. It's going to be primarily the same. I'm fired up for this. I think this is a massive storyline in the Big Ten, in the landscape of college football. Very excited to see it on display this Saturday. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys again. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll be back Saturday or Sunday breaking down what we saw. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.